Hi, I'm Lee, and you're listening to The Guitar Show, part of the British Tech Network. So this is a new show to the network in which we talk around guitars, gear, recording, iOS, Mac, and learning. So hints and tips, and maybe picking a song each week. I wanted to have one segment dedicated to the podcast, which is literally just around learning, and that'll be kind of community driven. So things I've picked up over the years, and also any suggestions that you guys have. So yeah, I really look forward to getting feedback on that one. So without getting too much into what the podcast's around, let's kick off. So let's kick off with the news this week. The main thing that's happening is Music Messe's happening in Germany from the 15th to the 17th of April. This is Europe's biggest music show. It's kind of similar to NAMM in Anaheim, which is one of the other big ones. This one and NAMM are the two big ones. It's open to both the trade and the public. I think there's some private days for the trade before it opens to the public. It's where all the manufacturers, some of them there, Gibson, Orange, Amplification are there. They'll be showing off their new gear. In terms of the trade, those guys will be going and looking at their ordering gear for this year. You know, striking deals, that kind of stuff, and then the public can go in and basically just check out all the stuff. I've been to a couple of the ones that they used to do in the UK, and you can literally just grab any guitar you want. Obviously, you got to be a bit careful you don't ding it, but I've seen lots of people just bash guitars there. No, manufacturers don't seem too bothered. I think they expect that they're going to take a few knocks. But it's a show that I've been meaning to go to for quite a while. I've just never been able to go over to. I do get invited to NAMM. But going to the States in January is quite difficult for me, so I've not had a chance. So this one in Germany seems kind of ideal. Maybe I'll go next year to that one. But what I thought we'd do is next week or the week after, we'd look at what had come out. So I'll be picking up a list. I'll be running through the things that have come out, and I'll just basically pick a list of maybe 5 or 6 things to talk through that look interesting, and I'll be sharing those with you guys. One thing which I think is directly related to the show this week is it's being rumoured that Epiphone are going to bring out an affordable version of Tony Iommi's SG. So I'm hoping most people would know who he is, but he's the guitarist within Black Sabbath. Someone that I used to play a lot of Black Sabbath stuff when I was a kid, learning guitar, like probably a lot of people. I really look up to him. He's a great guitarist. So I'm keen to get my hands on one of those in the shops. It's all unofficial at the moment, at the time of recording this, but it looks like it's going to tie up with the show, and they'll be doing an announcement. Something else that's happened this week is, for you Deep Purple and Richie Blackmore fans, is he turned 70 this week, April the 14th. I think most guitarists would consider Richie Blackmore one of the greatest British guitarists. I listened to a lot of Deep Purple when I was a bit younger, not so much these days, but I think everybody's used Smoke on the Water as a song to learn, especially when you're going from kind of your basic chords to your power chords. So happy birthday to Richie Blackmore. Finally this week, Mark Knopfler's releasing a solo album. There's a nice post on Music Radar where they've gone through some of the gear that he used on the album. It's one of the most kind of interesting parts about the post was the range of guitars that he's used. So he's used his Les Paul that you've probably seen him using on some of the Dire Straits stuff. There's a Strat in there. There's some acoustics. But, I'll be certainly listening to it on Spotify. I wouldn't be, purchasing it straight away. I always find his solo stuff a little hit and miss. But certainly, growing up in the 80s, like myself, Dire Straits were huge. And, they still got a very cult following. But I've always been a fan of Mark Knopfler's playing. I think he's a great guitar player. Great. He's just brilliant. Brilliant rhythm player. And listening to some of the... I actually saw an interview with him on BBC a little while ago where he's played quite a lot of lead stuff and he talked around his kind of background and some of the bluesy and folky type stuff he used to play. So definitely recommend checking that album out. I'll put the link in the show notes so you'll be able to see a link directly to the Music Radar website. But the album is called Tracker. But if you check it out on Spotify, I'd recommend before picking it up on iTunes or something, unless you're kind of a diehard Mark Knopfler fan. So that sums up the news for this week. So in the next segment, I thought I'd spend the bulk of this week's podcast talking about the various apps that I use as part of my kind of workflow. So this is something on iOS. I spend a lot of time in my kind of day-to-day job traveling around the UK mainly, but also, you know, at home it's always handy to have your recording gear with you, which is why the iPad's just been brilliant for me. I've had it since it came out, but it wasn't until a few years ago that I really got into it for recording. There's just a ton of apps on there, and what I've been doing over the years is kind of trying to figure out the best ones that work for me. So I think for this first podcast, I think the best thing to do is just talk about kind of starter apps. So these are the ones that I thought, you know, these are kind of essentials. There are a lot more. There are loads and loads of apps for guitar players out there. Some good ones, some crap ones. But I thought what I'd do is just pick some essential ones this week. And then as we go through this podcast series, we'll have a app section in there. And every week we'll go through, you know, favorite apps this week, you know, send me apps through. That'd be great, so I can see what you guys are discovering, but also share the ones that I've discovered over the time that I've been using the iPad and the iPhone. You know, when I don't necessarily always take my iPad with me when I'm traveling. So, you know, things on the iPhone, a lot of them, well, probably 90% of them work on the iPhone anyway. So, you know, if you've just got an iPhone, then you can listen to this bit too. So since I've gotten into iOS kind of full time with my music stuff, I found it to be a great tool to have for most musicians, not just guitarists. I can learn songs, I can record ideas on the go, and I can improve my playing by playing over backing tracks. But we'll go through that. I wanted to line up a different podcast where we talk around how to practice against backing tracks. So I think what I wanted to do on this section was just keep on some of these kind of like essential basic apps that we've been talking about. So first up is the YouTube app. So this is just the basic YouTube app that you get from Google. Really good app. They've improved it a lot actually over the last few years. It's a really good app. So why do I use it? So I think a lot of guitarists have probably discovered this already, but before I buy anything now, especially with guitar gear, I go on YouTube. I just do a search for that guitar or that amp, that pedal, and then I have a listen. You can't always get a great feel of how it sounds through your kind of iPad speakers. Definitely check a pair of headphones on to get the most out of it if you're looking at something like a guitar or an amp. But I mean, just give you an example. Last year, I'm a big fan of Joe Satriani, and last year I wanted to pick up a JS 1200 signature model guitar. So the first thing I did was fire up the YouTube app, do a search for Ibanez JS 1200. Shows me all the official kind of Joe Satriani videos, which are fine. But what I really wanted to get was a feel from the different kind of tones you can get from the guitar, not just, you know, obviously being a Satriani fan, I kind of know, I can know the kind of tone that he gets, and you know, I love that. But I wanted to see what else I could do with it. You know, could I use it for blues? Could I use it for kind of more heavy stuff? So I just did a search, found some other guitarists that are using his guitar, got a good feel for it. And the other thing that I use YouTube a lot for is learning songs. So, you know, it's quite easy to find the songs that you want to learn. There's tons and tons of guitarists on YouTube, some really, really good guys as well. And what I use it primarily for is, say there's a song that I want to learn, and say I tend to play by ear. So if I haven't got the tablature, or I'm trying to, you know, train my ear better, so I try not to look at the tablature. So I'll do a search if there's any tricky bits that I can't particularly find out how to do. But also another thing that I use YouTube for is there's a lot of people that do videos on kind of licks in the style of your favourite players. So say you wanted to, I don't know, learn about some BB King's licks, just do a search on YouTube for that, and there's a lot of people that are going to be showing you kind of BB King's favourite licks, kind of the scales that he uses and how to practice in that style. So that's my first one. So that's just the kind of standard YouTube app from Google. So next up is GarageBand. This is a free app if you've bought an iOS device over the last few years. So, you know, say you've bought an iPhone, say you bought the iPhone 6, but you've had your iPad for a few years, you should still be able to download it for free because it works across just your Apple ID. And the reason I use GarageBand is to record ideas. I used to use the voice app on the iPhone, but God knows why they did this, but when the iPad came out, I can't, unless, I'm sure I'll get corrected if I'm wrong, but I can't remember there ever being a voice recorder app on the iPad. So when GarageBand came out, I used it for recording ideas. And you can use it via the built-in mic or the external adapter. So I've got a few external adapters where I can plug a guitar directly into the iPad. We'll talk about this on a different episode in a bit more depth, but there are several good things about GarageBand. You've got the fact that you can use a built-in mic, which is the first one. You've also got iCloud integration. So one thing that I have done is, maybe I've been away with work or something, I've come up with a bit of an idea. I can put that just in, iCloud will sync that. So when I'm back on my Mac, I can just open up GarageBand and I can just import that straight in. Another area that I did like GarageBand for was the fact that you could put effects onto your guitar. So there are some built-in amp models and effects. So, one thing that to be honest, I use Logic Pro effects more than anything else, but it's quite nice if you are coming up with ideas to get the tone somewhere close to how you're going to play it. So maybe it's a clean tone, maybe it's an overdriven tone, so you get a better feel for how it's going to sound when you actually record it. So that's my next one. That's GarageBand. So my next app, which I think is essential to have, is called Guitar Toolkit. So this is an app that's been around for a long time. I think I had it on iPhone before the iPad even came out. It's done by a great company. They've got multiple apps. This one is, again, Guitar Toolkit. It's on the App Store. In the UK, it's £2.29, I think, at the moment, but it's well worth the money. It's one of those ones that I just put on my iPhone and my iPad and just leave there for when I need it, because basically the main thing I use it for is it's got a tuner. It's got a really good tuner on it. It just uses the mic in the iOS device. Obviously, if there's a lot of ambient noise, you're going to struggle. You do need to be in a bit of a quieter environment. It's got a chord and scale database as well, which is good. So, if you are learning, if you're kind of a beginner guitarist and you're trying to learn your scales or your chords, but also, for intermediate and advanced guitarists, if you're looking to learn some new chords, but based on a particular key, it's good for that. And scales is great as well for, if you're trying to learn your pentatonics for practicing blues. There's a metronome in there too, which I don't tend to use that much. I tend to play kind of practice timing with playing against tracks rather than just a metronome. I know a metronome is useful for maybe more technically gifted players than me, to be honest, for doing maybe scale runs and arpeggios and things like that. But I just play against tracks. I either put on a song that I want to play against, or I just open up GarageBand and just do maybe the basic blues back in and just play against that to practice timing. But again, for £2, this is a good app, and you may not use it every day, but if you're at that recording studio with your band or at your mate's house or something like that, and no one's got a tuner, just having it there is handy. It gets you out of problems. It's got me out of a few problems over the years I've had it, so I definitely recommend that one. And then lastly, for this podcast at least anyway, is Tab Toolkit. So this is from the same makers as Guitar Toolkit. Basically, what it does is it allows you to download guitar tablature straight to your device either via iTunes. So, when you plug your iPad or your iPhone into iTunes, you can drag files to it in one of the menus. I haven't got iTunes in front of me right now to check, but you can copy files to your iOS devices via iTunes. So you can either do it that way, but it's actually got a built-in web browser. So you should, unless you've got a loaded tab kind of saved on your machine, you shouldn't have to use it in iTunes. You just use the inbuilt web browser. There are loads and loads of guitar tablature websites out there, and you can pretty much get whatever you want. I mean, if you're learning guitar, I'd always recommend trying to learn by ear. It does help you overall, I think, to be a better guitarist. But if you're playing in a band, or if it's just a song that you just want to pick up, you don't want to spend the time, hours and hours trying to learn it, or you've got maybe 50% of it done by ear, and you want to learn the little tricky bits or the full song or the solos, then tablature is the way that I've always learned. I find it easy to understand, and via an app like this, it which will even play back the tablature as you learn it. It's just brilliant. There's also another app which I just want to mention, which is there's a website out there called Ultimate Guitar, which is pretty much every song that you'd ever think of, but they offer kind of a subscription model. Their website's it's okay, but I found it a little bit hard to use. but they've actually got their own app, which is just called Ultimate Guitar Tabs. And with this app, there's an in-app purchase of a subscription. So I can't even remember, to be honest. I paid a while ago. I think it was less than £10 for a full year subscription, and that just gives me full access to their kind of tablature database. So for me, I've kind of used both these apps, but nowadays I'm leaning on the Ultimate Guitar Tabs app just for the convenience of being able to access a library rather than having to download it into a browser via Guitar Toolkit. But that's one I definitely recommend for learning any songs or scales. But if you're into tablature already, you'll know, you might know of these apps. But if you are just getting into guitar as a beginner, then I definitely recommend learning tablature as a way to learn songs. So that's Guitar Toolkit and Ultimate Guitar Tabs. So in the next segment, which I'm going to just call Cool Stuff this week, this is where I'm going to talk about any apps or gear that I've been playing around with that I wanted to share with everybody. So for the first one, I'm going to talk about the Boss MEA T multi-effects unit. This comes in at around £200, so it's not cheap, but when you add up all the kind of the price of the separate pedals that you'd need to spend, it's actually a pretty good price. And this is an updated version of a pedal unit that I played to absolute death in a band about kind of 5-6 years ago. That was the ME50. So this comes with everything that you kind of had in that, but with a lot more different pedals, so a lot more reverb models and a lot more kind of chorus and modulation models. Basically what it is a floor unit that you can plug straight into an amp, or you can plug headphones into it, and it gives you a load of pedals. So it's got an overdrive, it's got an EQ, reverb, modulation, and it's got delay. It's also, this version now has got amp modeling built in, which has worked really well. You wouldn't use it. You wouldn't use the amp modeling with an amp, but if you're plugging in with your headphones, like I do a lot of the time, then the amp modeling is really good to have. It's got an onboard tuner. It's also got a pedal on board, so you can use that for volume and wah. One thing that this unit has got, which is the main reason I kind of picked it out as a unit to talk about this week, was the fact that it's got a USB out, so you can record straight into your PC or your Mac. I found that to work really well, so I've kind of built all my tones within the unit itself and saved those away in banks, and then I've just plugged into my MacBook Pro and just recorded them. So I'm kind of starting off to write a bit of an EP. I did an EP about 6 years ago, just like a little 4-track. So I'm going to try and do that again. I wanted to try and do an EP this year, maybe a 5-6 track EP in between everything else. But the ME50 has been great, and I've kind of chosen it for doing mainly the clean tones. One area that it does fall down on a little is overdriven tones. So you can get kind of a bluesy tone, that's fine, something like a Tube Screamer. But if you look at something a bit heavier, so if you're into your metal, then I think you'll struggle with it. But I think, definitely recommend for someone who's kind of more into your classic kind of rock tones and clean tones, the ME80 is a really great unit. I'd basically recommend this for anybody that plays at home a lot without using an amp. So, I've got an amp at home, but it's 50 watt. It's too loud to have at home, really. I can play it, but it's loud. So having the ME80 is a great way of practicing in the evenings when certain people are in bed, and I don't want to make too much of a noise in the house and get the neighbours around. So I'll put the headphones in, and I can just play as loud as I want then. The amp models, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, the amp models make a lot of difference to this. One thing I would say is if you're more into a heavy sound, so things like Metallica, those, you can pretty much get a good kind of Metallica tone out of it, but it does get a bit fizzy. I just haven't been able to get a great kind of overdriven sound that I'm happy with, especially getting a lead overdriven tone that I'm happy with. So what I'd recommend doing is, if you are into kind of your more heavier music, then definitely get yourself to your kind of local guitar shop and give it a go to make sure that it meets with what you need. But yeah, that's the Boss ME80 and that's the multi-effects unit. At the time of recording this, it's around £200. If you see it below £200, just grab it. It's a really good unit. Definitely highly recommend it. And what I'll do then over the following week or so until the next podcast, I'll play around with some new gear, some new apps. Maybe I'll select an app next time and we'll talk about that one. And also, if you've got any suggestions, then feel free to send them through. So one thing I really wanted to do as part of this podcast was to build up a little bit of community for guitar players, like I've mentioned already. So I was thinking about the best way to put a kind of play along with Lee type segment, but I think, for a first podcast, it's been quite difficult for me to do that. So I think the best way to do it is if I just give you I didn't want to go into, massive amounts of theory or anything, because I play by ear mostly, to be honest, and I don't know a huge amount of theory. I kind of know enough for me and to play what I enjoy. So, I think the best thing to do is if I have a think about maybe a song we could learn, or the way I improvise, one thing that I thought maybe might be quite useful. I want to get some feedback before I talk about this, because I can talk about this for quite a while, how to improvise. So I've never really had guitar lessons. I have had them on and off, but I've always found it better just to look to kind of learn things myself, and playing in bands. That's one of the biggest thing, is playing in bands and playing with other musicians. That's where I've improved the most, is through that. And what I found is, picking up a few hints and tips here and there has really helped my my improvisation skills. So I'd really like some feedback on this. So basically, if you'd rather me share my kind of, not so much hints and tips, but just my playing and how I've learned to play guitar over the years, then let me know. If you'd rather keep this to, maybe we pick a song each week, maybe you guys suggest a song or I pick a song, maybe starting from a beginner level up to maybe intermediate, and then each week what we'll do is we'll learn that song, share maybe some key things from it, maybe some if there's something interesting in there around maybe chord shapes or progressions, or maybe some lead, and then we can talk through that. But yeah, have a little think about that. For the next podcast, if I haven't got any feedback, I'll maybe go through the improvisation, how I improvise over a backing track. Maybe that's useful to start with, but let me know. I appreciate the feedback on that, and I think this segment we can kind of develop as we go along. I think this is the first episode. Let's see how we get on in terms of what you guys want to learn and where guys are going to get most benefit from. So just let me know on that one, and we can move this kind of segment into something a bit more kind of community driven. So just let me know, and then we can develop something together then, and in terms of this segment going forward. Okay, for this last segment, I thought I'd do a kind of a question and answer kind of feedback section, but given that this is a new podcast, I thought the best thing to do was just to let you know who the hell I am. It's obviously the first episode. Probably a lot of you don't know who I am, but if you follow me on Twitter, you may have been following me for my music or for my tech writing for a little while. But basically, I've played guitar for about kind of 20 years on and off. Played mainly at home, but I've also played in a few bands. But it wasn't until kind of it's probably about mid 2007, 2008 when I discovered YouTube and everything else that was going around then, like MySpace, which was big. I know it's gone now pretty much, but it was quite big back then. I got a bit more serious about recording, so I started buying recording gear and started to learn how to kind of master my own tracks and share those out to iTunes and some of the other Bandcamp and places like that. I did start a channel back then, and I did some gear reviews and shared my own music. I was lucky. I got to work with some of my favourite brands, so Marshall amps, PRS guitars. I was lucky enough to work with those guys creating video content, and another company called Spear Guitars, which I'm not actually sure if they're still going or not. They gave me 3 or 4 guitars to give away to my community back then, which was brilliant, and being a bedroom guitarist mainly, it was just something I was really, really proud of, to be able to build up a bit of a following on YouTube and give stuff back to the community. Off the back of that, I wrote some music too for some projects. So I used to write kind of little YouTube intros for people and for podcasts too. But the main thing which one of the things I'm most proud of was I wrote the theme music for the New York Rangers ice hockey team, their podcast. It was kind of the fan cast. So it was created kind of by the fans for the team, which was, for me, again, as a bedroom guitarist, was brilliant, and I got a lot out of that. I've also worked with a few companies to help beta test products. So, maybe if they've got something coming out, I'll get an early release of the hardware and then be part of their beta program to give them open and honest feedback around the product. It's something that I've done for quite a few years, and it's being open and honest with my feedback to the company is something which is very beneficial for a lot of people. I think, it's something my subscribers at the time certainly seemed to like most about me, was just it wasn't dressed up, it's just kind of open and honest feedback, and my playing was kind of at a good level where people could kind of get a good feel for the stuff I was playing. I'm not a shredder. I'm not a kind of a Steve Vai type player at all. And I think there's a lot of those guys out there, and I think I was playing a little bit more basic than that, and I think people appreciated it. On the other side of all that, I ran a blog back in kind of 2005, 2006 called Guitarist Hub, which for me it was moderately successful. I did get some writing jobs out of it and some freelance work that I still do now. So on the side of the day job and playing guitar, I also write about technology and guitars too. So I write on my own blog, which you'll see all the links in the show notes. It's mainly about iOS, bit similar to this podcast, to be honest. So kind of iOS and guitars. I still do this. I still freelance write. I've written for a magazine that's not actually around anymore called Tap, which was by Future Publishing, which was mainly around iOS. But I've contributed several times now to the Loop magazine, which is run by Jim Dalrymple at the loopinsight.com. So I still do that at the side. In terms of kind of style and my kind of influences and that, I mean, as a musician, I'm definitely kind of more of an instrumental guitarist, and kind of some of my favourite guitarists include kind of Eric Johnson and Joe Satriani. I've played in bands covering kind of Pearl Jam, Smashing Pumpkins stuff. But I'm also a big fan of blues music too. Some of my favourites there are Joe Bonamassa, Buddy Guy, Peter Green, Stevie Ray Vaughan, kind of a lot of the usual suspects, I guess. But let me know who your favourite players are and what your favourite bands are. That'd be good to know, especially for the kind of the learning section that we want to do in terms of picking songs each week. Again, if you've got any questions, just feel free to give me a shout on Twitter or via the comments on the page for this podcast. Okay, so that's it for the first episode of The Guitar Show. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks everybody for downloading and giving this podcast a go. I hope that you carry on with me in this journey of the Guitar Show, and I hope that you get some benefit from listening. And like I said, drop me a note on Twitter or via the podcast links. We can start to build a bit of community around learning. It's something that I'm very passionate about. Also, if you've got any suggestions around new segments or ways to improve the show, again, just feel free to drop me a note. I'm on Twitter at LJPUK. You can also find my blog at ljpuk.com. And obviously this show is part of the British Tech Network at britishtechnetwork.com. So thanks again, and I'll talk to you next time.